Join your host, Maddie Roche, as she brings you into a community of fee-only financial advisors who are successfully building profitable businesses that serve the next generation of clients. Learn from innovative advisors whose unique stories will inspire you to dream big and take action on your goals. Are you ready to live your best life and help your clients live theirs? Then you're in the right place.
Hello, and welcome to XYPN Radio, episode 329. I'm Maddie Roche, your host. I'm excited for today's episode for a number of reasons, but primarily because we're talking with advisors at a different stage in their business development than those we normally feature. Today, I'm interviewing two XYPN members and founders of firms who are in their first 6 months of launching. Chao Zhang and Stefanie Pickard are in the midst of figuring things out about their business right now and don't speak from a hindsight perspective. This podcast is fun and brutally honest. Despite Chao and Stefanie having nearly a 10-year financial runway as they started their firms, we have a really transparent conversation around imposter syndrome and how they wish they had done things differently. We talk about how many hours they really spend working on their firm and what has slowed them down over the past several months. Both Stefanie and Chao approach their firms with different perspectives and have different goals for each of them, but they share so many commonalities about how they feel about launching their firms and what it's done for them personally and professionally. If you're interested in what it's really like in your first 6 months of running your business, then this episode's going to be for you. A firm isn't a firm without clients. As the Chief Marketing Officer of your RIA, the most important job you have is guiding prospects through your marketing funnel and converting them to clients. If your funnel has a leak, you could be spinning your wheels and missing opportunities. Mapping your funnel is the first step towards developing an effective marketing strategy and a valuable tool for evaluating the health of an existing one. Download our free template and map your funnel at xyplanningnetwork.com/funnel. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's a community of advisors we've all been looking for. That's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Hello, Chao and Stefanie. Welcome to XYPN Radio. How are you both?
Good.
Thank you, Maddie. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, thank you.
Of course. I have looked forward to this. As I said in the intro, folks, this is a conversation with two advisors who are in their first year of starting their business. And if you are at all interested in what that journey is like, we're going to hear it from the mouths of two folks living it. So let's go ahead and start where we usually start, which is an intro to both of our guests. Stefanie, I'll let you start. Why don't you introduce yourself and your firm? Let us know what you've built so far. And Chao will go to you next.
Okay. Yeah, I am Stefanie Pickard. My firm, which is in Portland, Oregon, is called Old Growth Financial. Right now, I seem to be focusing on one-time plans for people who are mid-career professionals, usually around the age of somewhere between 35 and 50. And so definitely falling into that kind of XY range. And then I have been connecting a little bit with some pre-retirees as well, but generally folks who've never spoken with an advisor before. It's kind of their first time looking to dip a toe into financial planning and seeing where they're at.
Great. Wonderful. And I love that language that you're beginning to work with different people, because that's what's happening in the first 6 months is you're really trying things out. So Chao, what have you built in the past several months?
Sure. And I just want to take a second just to say that I've listened to all 300 plus episodes of XYPN Radio, and it was actually instrumental in my decision to start this firm. So I really appreciate the work you do, Maddie, and the work that Alan and Michael did prior to you. So it was very helpful, and I'm super honored to be here. And I hope that this helps other people who are maybe in similar shoes, decide and help them along their journeys.
I have no doubt that it will be. Thank you for that.
So my name is Chao Zhang, and the firm that I founded is called Think Different Wealth Advisors. I am based in Dallas, Texas, and the niche I focused on is tech professionals, with a secondary niche on clients who are interested in active management, so actual stock picking. And it's just me, just one person right now. It's a pretty small firm, 6 months in. And I have 8 clients who have officially signed.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Stefanie, would you mind sharing how many clients you're working with or have worked with and how long you've been in business?
Sure. I started taking clients back in September of 2021, and I have finished one-time plan, and currently I have 3 one-time plans that I'm actively working on. So I guess you could say I've started with, right now I currently have 3 clients, but I've had 4.
Beautiful. Wonderful. I can't wait to talk to you guys about how you plan to build your firms. I don't want to spend the whole podcast talking about your professional careers, but it would be super helpful to our listeners to know, what were you doing before you jumped into this? Chao?
Sure. So my background is primarily in investment management. It's always been my passion. I've always been super interested in personal finance as well. Out of college, I spent 3 years working at an investment fund, learning about high yield and derivatives and all those kind of esoteric stuff. Went to Berkeley for MBA for 2 years. And then I've been back in Dallas for the past 8 years, working at a different fund, doing equity research. So really learning stock analysis, financial modeling, in-depth due diligence on companies. So that's my history. It's always been kind of involved, not so much directly on the planning side. I've always helped friends and family informally on the planning side, but I haven't had official planning experience prior to this. So when I started my firm, it was truly from scratch, from zero.
Great. And we'll talk more about that. Stefanie, what was your background?
So I was a career change into financial advising. I worked in higher ed for 14 years and always kind of joked to say, what is it that I really want to do when I grow up? What steered me towards financial planning was, on the side, I was for quite a few years, 7 or 8 maybe, I was a volunteer tax preparer. And I found that I would prepare someone's taxes and then really enjoy kind of doing a small amount of planning afterwards with that client, whereas I was supposed to probably kind of move on to the next person. I'd be like, well, here's a few things that you could do that would, especially because everyone was low income, anybody that had a balance due, that was often really devastating for them. So I would try to help them with that. And so that was what kind of prompted me into just looking into financial planning. I did the education portion first. I enrolled at Kansas State in their master's in science program in personal financial planning and completed that. And what I really enjoyed about that is they have a really strong focus on financial therapy. And I actually finished their certificate program in financial therapy there as well as part of the degree program. So it was a really, really holistic take on financial advising, which I really liked. And that kind of prompted, I think it was a really good fit, because that's what the type of thing that I like to do, is kind of definitely develop a plan that someone will stick with and that works for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, and then I worked at a firm that was a hybrid firm for a little while, and then left there back in 2020, and then started my firm in the middle of last year.
Wow. Incredible. Let's talk a little bit about the decision now that it's still kind of top of mind about why you started your firm. And how did you get the inclination that this is what you wanted to do? Chao, you mentioned you've listened to all of our podcasts. So when did you find XYPN Radio, and how long did it take you did it take for us to convince you that you should start your firm?
Yeah, I will say a warning out there. If you listen to all 300 episodes, there's kind of no other path. By that point, you're so beyond soul, like there's only one path. But I've always known, kind of, going back to like 10 years, maybe when I was in MBA, I was talking to my classmates, like someday I want to run my own thing. Like I want to have flexibility, be able to run the company the way I want, be able to invest and manage portfolio the way I think is appropriate. And over the years, I also realized I really like that in-person interaction, being able to impact families and see the impact you make in people's lives. Whereas on the institution side, you're kind of more dealing with large companies, and you don't really see that personal impact. So I've always thought about that. And I think, with COVID, it was just time to rethink about your life and career. Just felt like, I think I was ready financially. It was just like, if not now, when? And it took me a year to like, I listened to all the podcasts. I was doing some other prep work. And at the end of the year, I was just ready to go. I was like, this is it. This is what I have to do. The calling was too strong at that point to do anything else. And so here I am.
Love it. Thank you for that. Stefanie, what about you? It's not often that someone who is a career changer spends only a few years in a firm and then says, let's do it on our own. What got into your mind?
I think that was probably always the plan, maybe from the beginning. I knew that I'd want the flexibility. I think that often if you read surveys and things like that about why people go into financial planning in general, it's because they want that kind of work-life balance or flexibility, not having to punch a clock, things like that. And so it draws people into planning, I think, maybe to begin with, and then even more so, obviously, you have a lot more flexibility if you're running if you're your own boss. So, and also the other thing was I really wanted the ability to take on the types of clients, to serve the clients exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be able to have that person on the phone that calls me and to be able to say yes, instead of, oh, well, you don't have enough money to open an account here or something like that, so maybe check back with me later. If I want to be able to help that person, then I can design my firm around that type of client so that I can serve them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That is the story over and over and over again. Freedom and flexibility and the ability to work with who we want to work with. And those are just two of the strongest drivers. And I commend everyone who follows that instinct. Let's talk about the big black cloud of compliance that scares so many people away from doing this on their own. Stefanie, I'll start with you. You worked at a former firm. So I assumed when I chatted with you earlier that you knew all about ADVs and how to get them filed and what compliance looked like. And tell us about that.
Well, I kind of laugh because I was like, at my last firm, we had an amazing staff. And so as an advisor, I was able to just focus on clients, which was amazing, and didn't actually really have to worry anything about compliance or anything like that. So I even have, lunched with some of them since then and said, boy, I have a lot more respect for it. Not that I didn't before, but now I really feel what it is that you do. And they're like shaking their head saying, yep. Mm-hmm. So I decided to do the registration myself. That wasn't my plan because, like I said, I didn't actually really feel like I knew a lot about compliance. A number of reasons that I did that. Part of it was a real good learning curve for me. I know what's in that ADV because I wrote it. And I really like that. Of course, I can't speak to how much other folks, I'm sure that they know their ADV really well as well. But I really felt like I had to kind of be deep in the weeds, having to put my fingers on the keyboard and write it out myself. Also, I just kind of started to do it as a way of thinking that I would get it lined up for compliance, and then kind of realized that I had done most of it. And XYPN was still really helpful in that there are templates and tons of information on the boards. I did tons of searching, lots of information just able to find just through kind of the back end of XYPN. So it was actually really integral to be a member and to do that. Right. And I really just spent a lot of time looking at other firms' websites, liking their business model, and then digging through their ADV and saying, okay, well, how did they do it? Mm-hmm. And then I just decided to go ahead and submit it to the state. Oh, I also called the admin of the state a lot. There's some great admins there who were really helpful and gave me a lot of really good tips. So I think I heard really early on in one of the compliance meetings with XY to not be afraid to call the state. And I completely agree with that, regardless if you're doing it yourself or if you're working with one of the compliance folks at XY, definitely call them up. Tell them what you're doing. Don't be afraid. That would be definitely something that I would shy away from. And I felt empowered to do that. And yes, they were very, very helpful because they even gave me some tips for the future. Like, be sure to get in your end of the year paperwork right away. They were really kind of hammering to me what's important in my state. And I didn't have much trouble with the examiner. A few questions that were super easy to answer, some of which I had kind of already provided the answers to. So I just kind of had to point them in the right direction as far as where it was. And yeah, so it was fairly smooth sailing. Yeah.
Congrats on that.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Chao, you decided to use XYPN compliance. I'm wondering why. And then with that extra time that you had, how did you use it, given another team was kind of helping you through compliance?
Yeah, I actually recently used XYPN again to do additional registration in California. So I've used
Right.
registration services twice. So that must speak something about a return customer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been very helpful. I think the thing that basically you're given a shared Google Docs. There's multiple versions. There's different sections you can adapt based on what your unique firm needs are. And there's a very responsible person you're assigned to at compliance that works with you to draft your document. What really appealed to me, obviously, was one, the time savings, and two, just the expertise and experience that XYPN compliance has. And listeners may or may not know, but XYPN actually has two Texas regulators on the compliance team, right? So that's something. And just having thousands of registrations filed, I think that people there know kind of what regulators like, what they want to see. So it's a little of a smoother process in terms of getting things approved. I know if I was writing my own thing, I would probably put in additional stuff that may have just raised more questions and may have added stuff that was unnecessary. And my registration process was very smooth. I think Texas approved me in about 4 weeks. And then California, the second one was like 3 or 4 weeks also. So it's pretty quick. And so I've been really impressed.
I love that. Talk to me about what you were doing while the registration was kind of happening. I know that is one of the times I describe it as the twiddle your thumbs phase, but really you should be working. What were you working on during those weeks?
It was technology and process. Yes. So there is, 10, 15 different key pieces of technology that was, and within each type of technology, there's maybe 3 or 4 vendors I was evaluating. So there was literally some weeks where I would spend the entire week just evaluating, okay, is it e-money? Is it Right Capital? I mean, just trying to figure out like, how do I text clients? That was like way big black hole that I went down. Like, how do you do compliant texting? Like there's my rep chat, but then does my rep chat have the best user interface? And then you start reading, reviews online. You just go down these big black holes to try to evaluate those things. And then of course, not really having a process from prior firm, I spent a lot of time just thinking about like, how do I want to do my process? So there's plenty to do, rest assured.
Yeah, plenty to do for sure. And you'll never get that time back is what I try to tell members. Given that you both are in your first 6 months, I'm really interested in your perspective about how your former careers and experience and financial security and things like that have prepared you for what you're doing now. And it less of a question of 5 years in, how you think it has impacted, but what have you seen in terms of the nuts and bolts of what you brought to the table that has made this an easy transition for you, Stefanie?
Yeah, it would be difficult to do this, I think, if I wasn't financially prepared. It didn't, probably similar to what Chao was saying. I'm definitely shaking my head a lot about your transition and when you moved into starting your firm. Similar situation. I may have taken the timeline a little bit differently, but the way the things are in the world and the flexibility that things suddenly required and how you just start thinking about your life and your work and stuff, definitely had an impact there. But I still felt prepared. And I think coming into this, financially secure, somewhat, having a spouse who was working. So we had an income already had an income coming in.
Chao, how about you? How do you feel like you were prepared to start your firm?
Sure. There's a couple of different areas that I think about preparation. Like Stefanie mentioned, financially is a very important one. I'm fortunate in that I have a wife that also works, and we live relatively frugally, so we can mostly get by on her income. We also were max savers while I was working, so we had a good amount of savings as well. So I didn't feel like I had to get to a certain number of revenues. I wasn't pressured to take home a certain amount of income by X number of years. So that was a big part. The second part I would say is experience. I felt like I had plenty of investment experience. I felt like I could maybe use more planning knowledge. So what I did was pursue a CFP while I was kind of in the planning phase of launching the business. I took classes kind of on evening and weekend classes to really help me learn and become more rounded in terms of actually having all the planning knowledge and to have that confidence to like, okay, I have a CFP, I know all this information, the book knowledge, that gives you just more confidence that you're talking to clients. And finally, I would just say just any kind of prep work that you can do if you had additional time. Since I took that whole year just to seriously prepare, while Stephanie was writing her ADV, I was learning WordPress from YouTube, trying to build my own website. So that's what I did with a good chance. It actually took me 6 months to build my website, but now I know how to change everything really fast. So that's nice.
Good for you. Good for you. You mentioned your financial runway and the savings you had. How long could you have gone, do you think, without earning revenue?
Yeah. You're going to kind of laugh, but like long, like probably like 10 years plus. Like it really wasn't like it, because we were living pretty much on my wife's income and we're really frugal, that it wouldn't have been like optimal if I was 10 years in, I had made no income. That wouldn't be a good career choice. Like I probably at some point be like, this is not working out. Right. So like you need to have a certain level of success, even, if you don't need the cash flow, because you need to save for retirement, you need other things, right? Plan for kids' education down the line. But I wasn't, and that's probably speaks to how kind of, conservative I am from a risk management perspective, that I didn't want to feel like I had to bring in paycheck by X date.
I think this is so important for our listeners. Of the things I want to hammer home through this podcast is that financial buffer can make or break someone. And the mental health that we can each carry through our journey is much better if you have that kind of cushion. Stefanie, how long do you think you could have gone without earning revenue?
Similar to Chao. So I don't want to discourage someone out there who feels like they're not in our situation, because I think it is doable without the really strong financial security. However, I do have a spouse that we could live off of his income indefinitely. That would not be an issue. And then we're probably fairly close to our own financial independence as well. So that's not, I'm seeing Chao shaking his head too. So it's kind of probably how we felt. I don't think that that's 100% necessary though, because the revenue, if you will come in. And so, but yeah, same thing as exactly what Chao said, which is, I don't want to do this as a job if it's just going to lose me money or something like that. So it has to be, you have to make it worth your while to do it. But having that year or maybe two buffer certainly takes the pressure off quite a bit. And the other thing that I think is really nice, especially if we're talking about being in the first 6 months, is it gives you that freedom and that flexibility to steer away from certain types of clients right away. Because I think that if you were desperate for revenue, you would take on anybody, and maybe somebody who wasn't a good fit, which can be really, really hard. You may get yourself into a situation where you're doing some planning that you're not comfortable doing, which would be really, doubly difficult, right? Or just a client that you don't like, you don't want to work with, that's really hard, that's, nitpicky, if that's something you don't like, or something like that. And so that, I think, is kind of the number one thing as far as the financial freedom of that psychological idea of, I don't have to take on this client. I've already met with prospects who I've said, this is not my area of expertise. And it feels really good to just kind of let them go, because I know that I don't necessarily have to bring that person in.
Right. That is a very good point. The danger of bringing on a client that you kind of, Wes Shannon said it a few episodes ago about one client ends up owning you if you take the wrong client, owns your time, owns your, emotional health and your revenue. Chao, I'm interested, would you have started your firm without as much revenue support that you had?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know if I would have, because I'm so risk averse in that sense. I feel like I for sure need to know that I could go 3 years without taking a salary for me to feel comfortable. That's just me. And also it's just, I was also walking away from, a six-figure sort of salary from my prior job. So it was a big, financial decision to make. It's sort of a passion thing I'm pursuing as well. But to know that at least I'm not going to be, at risk of, say, losing your house or paying the rent, that kind of thing is important to me.
Mm. Stefanie, how would you have done things differently had maybe not had the same kind of financial support?
I agree with Chao, and I think our personalities sync up in that way quite a bit. Pretty risk averse. I've always worked since I was 14. I had a summer job. It felt very strange for the first time ever to not have that paycheck coming in. Of course, then you kind of, when you do have the financial security, you relax into it really quickly and you think, oh, I better get going here because this is great. But a couple of months go by and you think, what am I doing? But yes, it was good. I didn't lose my momentum to keep moving forward. But I think that if I hadn't done that, it definitely would have been a lot harder to balance working really hard. You practically going door to door looking for clients because you would feel like you needed to bring in that revenue really quickly. And it would have been harder to make business decisions because you just have to decide, move on, get the money in the door. Like Chao was saying about, investigating different software and things like that. You wouldn't have as much time to do that. You'd say, okay, well, I guess I better use this because I don't have time to make this decision because I need to get money coming in the door. It's probably certainly doable for people who, especially if you're, really good at bringing in clients, if you have that prior experience and you know that you can go out and hit it and bring it in. But having that flexibility, like I said before, to bring in the clients that you want at the pace that you want to balance still with your life and business decisions, we're still able to kind of manage all of that is a nice place to be. But again, don't want to completely discourage people out there who think, I don't have 2 years of cushion of money or something like that. I think it is doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It certainly is. And on the podcast that we hear over and over and over again is, 10 years is not the kind of cushion every advisor walks into this with. And I tip my hat to each of you for that. 2 to 3 years is that comfort area that we really see over and over and over again. And even, a year or two. But the things you each have brought up around the kind of flexibility it's given you in terms of how quickly you ramp up and things like that, that's something for folks to weigh. If you want to really hit the ground running and do it on a shoestring budget, by all means. But it does mean you got to be, serving clients faster and get those processes in order. Chao, how has client acquisition been for you?
I think I've been relatively fortunate. We did our sort of sound prep session last week, and I told you I had 5 clients. And as you heard earlier, I have 8 clients, which means I signed 3 clients over the past week, if that's the math behind it. My point in mentioning that is just clients come in very lumpy waves. So if you met me during XYPN, I had the conference in November, I had those same 5 clients. So which means I didn't add anyone 2 months. But I've been doing meetings, and everyone I added in the past week, I met with last year at some point. Some of them left. They just kind of fell off and didn't come back on New Year's, and resolution or whatever it is, they decided they want to do something now, and they came back. I think that's one of the things that's as hard as about client acquisition is that it comes in waves. Like you get a couple and then you won't get anybody for a long time. And it's sort of a lumpy business.
I like that, lumpy business. Stefanie, how has it been to market yourself and to have those kind of conversations with your potential clients, with you in the driver's seat of this business?
Yeah, that's tough because that's really what you're selling. Unlike Chao, who spent your time while I was, as you said, while I was doing my own registration, you were building your website. I made a real hard run at building a website. I realized I was just wasting my time. It looked terrible. I was spending, 3 hours trying to figure out why these 2 buttons wouldn't line up. It was making me crazy. Actually. Right? It was making me crazy. And so I took the budget that I had originally to do the registration towards building a pretty basic website. And one thing that was funny about that process in working with someone else was he had all these stock photos and different things like that on there, and it was very generic. And I kind of said that this needs to look a little bit more like a MySpace page for me. We kind of joked about that because I said, oh no, it has the front page has to be a giant picture of me. And as much as I don't want to look at that, that's all there is. That's all there is. And so, and I think that might be a key to my somewhat early success too, was building a fairly personal page. There was a spot where he had a family, a stock photo of a family all doing, a selfie, 3 people crammed in doing a little selfie. And I took it and I replaced it with basically almost the exact same photo, only it's me and my family.
Yeah.
And it's right there on the front page. So my little 6-year-old is right there. And not to be too in your face, like, oh, this is my 6-year-old, or something like that, using it, but he's just there. It doesn't necessarily say anything about it, but he's there. And so I because you are just selling yourself. And so I wanted people to see me. That was hard also, because you want to kind of hide behind a little bit, especially at the beginning, but it's helped build my confidence as well, to know that people that are coming to me have already kind of seen all of that and they know what to expect.
I love that.
Yeah.
Chao, how has it been to sell yourself in your business?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the, approaches I had was I focused on people in my personal network who were also in my niche. And I'm fortunate that I do know a lot of people in the Bay Area, just having spent 2 years there, that classmates who've since gone on to work at different tech companies. So I've been able to actually just connect with some former classmates. And a lot of it is just explaining what I do, trying to help them understand why they need financial advice, how I can help them, with their stock compensation, with kind of building towards retirement. Some of it is explaining about me, but a lot of times they already kind of know and trust me. They kind of know me as the guy who's always been doing investing, doing finance. It's kind of the expert in that area. So that level of trust was built. And I also had a little bit of referrals here and there from one of my, people that I've helped, friends I've helped in the past. It's always a little bit weird when you have to start trying to selling yourself, but I just try to focus on how do I help them get to their goals?
Love that. I'm interested in the severity of imposter syndrome for you too. One of my recent podcasts, we've talked a lot about imposter syndrome, and it tends to come up every other episode or so. But on a scale of 1 to 10, Stefanie, at this point in your business, where do you put yourself on having imposter syndrome, 10 being you're debilitated by it?
Goodness, I think it depends on the day.
That's the best answer.
Yeah. And it probably depends on what prospect I'm talking to, because I've learned to recognize that if I feel like I'm at a 10, then this is just not a good fit. So kind of get back to that.
Totally.
Because if I'm talking to someone and I'm thinking, oh, I'm way over my head as far as what their situation is, or I'm not connecting with them. I feel like there are some people who are just kind of this. I've talked to a few people who are really set back. I can't bring them out at all. That's also another way that I feel like it's maybe too much of a challenge. That's when I start getting that imposter of thinking I have no business doing this. It's always the thought that kind of goes through my head.
That is such a good answer, Stefanie. And you've alluded to something like that in your last couple answers around just trusting your instinct around how you feel with the clients. Not that you have to love them, but you have to want to know you can bring value to them. And I think so many folks are interested in just getting the client, and then things are derailed from there. But your answer to this is quite honest, in that if you're at a 10, that's actually not a fit.
Yeah. Somebody that makes me feel like a 10. And then other folks, I feel like a 1, like, oh, I can just go in and I can help you out. I'm going to be the one to help you. Yeah. Then those are the right clients. I've had a few prospects, that I've had that connection with, and then they don't, and then I don't hear from them again. And I'm like, okay, well, something went wrong there, but who knows? You're not going to get them all. So, but yeah, I'm all over, probably from all the way from a 0 to a 10, depending on the situation, the day, the moment, what I'm working on. But already in the early part of running this business, it's coming down quite a bit. And even that step of recognizing this just means that they're not a good fit, already just brings it down. Just say, this is not the client for me. Maybe refer them out. No problem.
Very good answer. Chao, how about you?
Yeah, I think Stefanie definitely hit it on the head when she said it varies by day, and it comes and goes. And it's more than even just clients. Like I think it's just that I've heard it referred to as head trash in prior podcasts. I think that's the doubt that you give yourself that maybe you shouldn't have done this. Like you don't really know what you're doing. Like I can't figure out all this software. This compliance is way too overwhelming. So when I started, I was like, can I get 2 or 3 clients a year? I'd be really happy. Like if I do I think I can do 2 clients a year? I think 6 months, might be doable. Maybe I can get those 2. And then after you get a couple, you're like, what if no one else finds me the next 6 months? You're like always doubting yourself. There's always some voice that's, saying that this is, maybe it's not going to go so well. But it comes and goes, and you'll have your wins and you'll have your losses. It's tough. I think that's one of the toughest parts in starting the first year is that you have that, those thoughts, some of which are negative, some of which are not warranted, but they're just there and they're part of starting a business.
And I think the amount of mistakes you have to make to get it right is something people may not be comfortable doing. And especially working alone, to not have someone to be able to course correct you or coach you out of it or bounce ideas off of. Chao, what would you say is your biggest insecurity about your firm at this point?
For me, it's figuring out what the ultimate pricing and capacity looks like. Because unlike most other for financial planners, I need to spend a good chunk. Ideally, I'd like to spend 50% of my time researching stocks, which is a lot of time, and which means my capacity is going to be half of everyone else's. Right. And so I need to think about how many clients can I take on in the long run? What kind of pricing do I need to have to make that work out? And one thing that I think comes up as you listen to these podcasts is almost unavoidable. Like everyone underprices when they first come out of the gate. It's totally normal because you're trying to get somebody and you don't want to ask for too much. It's hard to get even the first person. So people end up raising their prices multiple times down the line. I really try to avoid that to the extent I can, which is hard still. So I force myself like, hey, if I get 5 clients, I'm going to raise my prices a little bit. And if I get 5 more, I'm going to raise it a little bit, just have some kind of mechanism so that I don't too horribly underpriced. But in the long run, it's just trying to figure out kind of what that ultimate model looks like for me. Because I don't want to build a really big firm. Like I don't want to build an enterprise firm by any means. I'm not even sure if I want to go beyond myself because I just like helping people and working with clients.
Great answer. Stefanie, what would you say is your biggest insecurity?
Yeah, it's similar probably to Chao as far as just still not quite knowing exactly who it is that's the right fit and whether or not you're pricing it correctly, that it's fair to the client and to you, and whether or not, clients are going to be completely satisfied with the deliverables is probably the other thing. Just because what I did before at the hybrid firm looked really different than doing a one-time plan. So making sure that the clients are getting the value out of what you're doing, what I'm doing, without either just not necessarily working too hard for me, but delivering too much that they're not going to use, too much information, going beyond what they're looking for or not going enough. So just kind of meeting exactly what people's expectations are and things like that. I think that would probably always continue because everyone's going to be a little bit different when it comes to you. But the way I'm working on that right now is really in the prospect meetings, trying to really set expectations really clearly, especially because one-time plans, don't involve a lot of implementation. So making sure that it's clear to people that they can then take this information, this kind of education that I've given them and go out and use it. So but there's still a little bit of insecurity around the processes there and what exactly that looks like.
Totally. I'm interested in some advice that you have for our listeners around kind of before they launch and after they launch. But before they launch, when they're working in firms like the ones that you two came from, what are some tips you would give to an advisor around people to talk to, questions to ask, things to think about? If they're not ready to write the business plan, what are things they can be doing now to prepare themselves maybe for a future career in this? Chao?
Well, if they're listening to this podcast, they're definitely on the right track because it's you're hearing experiences, right? From other advisors who've done the same. And if you listen to enough of it, you definitely hear some themes jump out. So I would say, listen to the podcast, listen to other podcasts, right? That are people kind of about running financial planning practices. If you want to network with sort of planners in your local area and sort of take them out to lunch, just to have that more personal discussion about your situation and have their perspective, I think that would be really helpful as well.
What about you, Stefanie?
What was helpful to me was working with a variety of different clients at my previous firm and maybe starting to really think about what type of client I would want to work with on my own.
Yeah.
And think I didn't take any clients with me for a variety of reasons when I left. But I did think about who I would have wanted to have taken and kind of the demographics of who they were, or even, as I said before, people who called, people who I talked to who I had to turn down, really kind of mental noting those as far as what about them was somebody that I wanted to work with. So that's something that, without really taking any time away from your current position, that you can be thinking about what your firm might look like in comparison to what you're already doing. Because that's the experience that you're going to be building on anyway, because that's your experience. And so if you're at a firm, you're looking to leave and build your own thing, then thinking about what that might look like just in the process of doing your job. What do you want to do? What do you not want to do? Things like that can be really, I think, a good way to get started just in your mind.
Great. I'm interested in how you all are staying motivated on a personal level, but also on a professional level. Going out on your own kind of puts you in your own little echo chamber with yourself. And I'm interested in who do you go to when you've got problems and questions, Chao?
I think the best answer is probably to try to find a network of advisors that you can have some kind of small group, like XYPN. That's one of, I found a small group of people that I met through NAPFA, they're like a mixer group that is a small group. I've been to some of those XYPN hosted coaching calls where you're on with a small group of advisors who are also launching around the same time. It's a good community to kind of share your early struggles and frustrations. So I think it can be a very lonely road because you're just one person. I'm in my house, right? So it's just me, and I've got two little kids running around, and sometimes I complain to them, but I don't know if they get it or not. But yeah, so going to the XYPN conference, that was a great experience, being able to meet people and really bond and form new relationships. I've came out of that with a number of people I keep in touch with. So those kind of support groups, I think, is crucial.
Great. Oh, I'm so glad to hear. Stefanie, how about you?
That's one of my goals for 2022 is to build a better network, because I do find that I'm kind of out here on my own. I tend to spend a lot of time just kind of researching on the forums and stuff like that. Like I was talking about earlier I wasn't quite sure what deliverables would look like. I managed to find just endless amounts of deliverables when I searched. And so those sort of things being in place are really helpful. I'd like to work on contributing to that more as I move forward. This is a nice step to be part of this podcast. So I'm contributing to something, but instead of just kind of lurking, to actually participating. And I have more recently started to connect with a few advisors who are doing something similar with the moving away from AUM model and doing one-time plans or potentially subscription plans, things like that. So kind of connecting with those advice only and advisors. So, but it is something that I need to work on a little bit more, because I do tend to just kind of turn to the internet rather than rather than somebody that I know. I do have a few advisors that I know personally, and I will sometimes just send them like a text message and say, hey, what do you think about this? But that's definitely, I'd say, one of the things that I by far miss the most is having coworkers. It's really hard not having coworkers. I used to be always the one that would kind of walk around with my cup of coffee and check in with everybody every morning and just kind of see what's going on. And definitely was always, or you get off a call, and because we all shared clients, there was no confidentiality, and say, oh my gosh, this is going on with this person. What do you think? And you'd get all kinds of different opinions. And that was so nice. And now I'm like, okay, I can maybe ask about it, but you have to make it super abstract. And I'm super nervous about revealing any sort of client information or anything like that. And so I keep my questions really generic. And so that's what turns me back towards kind of just searching around and figuring things out. So it's also kept me probably in my comfort zone, because I know that I don't necessarily have that safety net of, other advisors to just say, solve this problem for me. I'm the one that's got to do it. So it keeps me really in my realm. So that's been good, because I haven't really felt uncomfortable with anything that I've done. Kind of getting back to what we were talking about earlier, but I definitely would like to build a stronger network and not be an island over here. Yeah.
Great answers. I think the truthfulness in both of your answers really comes through. I'm interested. So many of you all say, oh, I got into this for time flexibility. Now, let's be honest. How many hours a day are you thinking about your business, Chao?
Well, let's put it this way. When I was doing my CFP, which overlapped with me starting a business, I may not have exactly have done it the same way, but I think I was working, not just thinking. I was working like 65-hour weeks for a couple of weeks there. So it's there's flexibility. Yes, absolutely more flexibility. So for example, like this week, one of my kids has COVID and it's quarantining at home, and I do a lot of childcare duties, but then I get to do work like after the kids go to bed, like 9 p.m. at night, I start doing more work. So there is definitely more flexibility than you would have in a regular job. That's absolutely true. I guess it's up to each person. I definitely did a lot of hours when I was first starting out, trying to do, manage all the tech solutions, you wear so many hats. And as you're getting off the ground, you just feel like you have to kind of go hard at it. But I feel like it's work that's meaningful, more meaningful than, just kind of working at a big institution, and you're really seeing the impact, and that gets me up and gets me excited. And I think the test is I don't necessarily keep track of Fridays or Sundays or Mondays. I just kind of days go on. Whereas, I've had jobs in the past where I knew which day was Friday, I knew which day was Monday, and I did not look forward to Monday. I'm glad this is not one of those jobs, and it's one that you kind of lose track of time, and I think that's a good thing.
Oh, I love that answer, Chao. Thank you. Stefanie, how about you?
I'm probably the opposite. I would say I'm working maybe 10 or 20 hours a week.
Oh, good for you. Now, does that mean you're really not thinking about the client scenarios in the business, or?
Somewhat, but I'm able to compartmentalize it. That was probably my number one priority. I really try to only work business hours, and I really only work until school's out. So I'm done at 3:00. And, if there's something, obviously I would never let something drop, but I'm like, nope, these are the hours that you work, and then you don't want to be working after that. I keep trying to go back to, this is why you did this, is to have this flexibility. That said, it doesn't mean that I didn't work more in the time that I was doing the registration or building the website or really thinking about things. There was a lot that was going on where it was much more full-time a few months ago. I feel like I'm comfortable and I don't want to just keep going back and rethinking things. I kind of told myself that I would do it like this for a year, see how it fits, and then maybe revise whatever it might be, software, methods, anything else. And then mostly just focusing on client service right now, just the clients that I have, doing the best job that I can for them, not being really afraid to revamp that, just because obviously that's really important that I don't wait a year. If something's not working there, then I need to change it right then. But other than that, so it's really just been focusing on what I'm delivering to clients. But yeah, I don't really have a choice. I don't have the option of working 60 hours a week. I just don't. I am the one that's in charge of the household. And somebody has to make dinner, and that's usually I'm the default person to do that, and that's not going to change. And so I have to do these things. So I knew that going into this is where I was going to find the balance, and I needed to have the balance right at the beginning. So right now, just working on client meetings, making sure that all of my notes and everything is impeccable and everything has been thought through. And I've also, in my process of building these plans for people, I deliberately spread out their meetings. I don't invite them to schedule the next meeting until I'm ready for that. And then that's usually a few more days at least. Sometimes they might schedule it 2 weeks out because their schedule works like that. That gives me way more time to spend working on these things. I'm not having to think of things off the cuff. And then that way I'm delivering them these plans that are, really thought out, really hopefully well done. And within a schedule that works for me.
Yeah. Beautiful. We've got time for just a couple more questions. Chao, you alluded to something you would have done differently in hindsight, but let's talk about what is one thing you would have done differently if you could wind back the time.
Let's see. I think, and this is more specific to my situation. I was doing the CFP. I was still scheduled for the CFP exam when I quit my job and started my firm. I think I would have spaced those two out a little bit separately. I would have finished the CFP exam and then launched the firm and just be able to focus on that. So like people, of course, a lot of people do the CFP exam while working full time. So they do juggle two things. I just felt like when I was starting a firm, there was just so many things to evaluate. There was just an endless amount of things and trying to do that while still researching stocks, while still studying for the CFP. I think the three things at the same time was just a little too much where I was really sprinting those couple of weeks, and I would have liked to have that spread out a little better. But that was more for my situation.
How important was the CFP for you?
That's actually a great question. It's something I really thought about because I came into it having a CFA. And I had read a lot of personal finance blogs. I've been like sort of personal finance geek all along. So I thought I knew a lot about personal finance. I was debating like, do I want to get this CFP? Because, maybe I don't need one. I have CFA. I can kind of get registered with that alone. But I decided, you know what? I don't have experience working in a planning firm officially. So you don't know what you don't know. So I decided to take it. And I'm actually really happy I did. There's, of course, a lot of sections, like the investments course was like just like a total review, just a breeze. But then there were other stuff I just never got exposed to before, like from the employer side. Like I've always done 401ks from the employee side. I never thought about vesting, like cliffs and like types of defined benefit, discrimination testing, things that you would never get exposed to unless you had a business, right? Yeah. Those things you just don't experience. And estate planning, as a relatively young person, I didn't really deal with trusts and that kind of stuff. So having those sections of CFP was really good in terms of making my knowledge much more well-rounded. And the CFA is really much more geared just towards the investment sections, a little bit on different stuff, but not to the same extent as the CFP. So I feel like you kind of really do need both of them, especially if you want to do planning.
Great.
So yeah, it was absolutely, I felt it was a great decision to do that.
Great. Stefanie, what would you have changed about how you approached launching your firm?
I think it's a little bit like an 18-year-old that has to pick their major going in and they don't know what they're doing because they're 18 and they're just getting out of high school. And you feel like that again, going in to launch your firm. And I think that getting really hung up on little decisions. I wish I hadn't spent time, just make a decision, move on. You can change something later. That would probably be the main thing because I spent a lot of, especially like with the website, spent way too long trying to build that thing before I decided to just have somebody make it for me. And I wish I wouldn't have spent all that time because it was just such a waste and it was so frustrating. That's kind of a side thing, but those things all matter when it comes to doing business. Nothing is really on the side anymore. And so that would probably be the main thing. That hit me when, I'm an XYPN member, obviously, and they provide Right Capital as part of the software stack. I'd never used Right Capital. At first I was like, oh great, this is just planning software. But then when I started getting into it, I was struggling with, I don't understand why when I'm inputting this, it's not showing up over here. It just wasn't flowing right for me. And one day I was just like, no, go back to Money Guide Pro. Yeah. Because that's what I used before. And so I just signed up for Money Guide Pro and I keep telling myself, I'll go back and I'll maybe learn Right Capital or maybe use both or something like that. But that was a big hang up for me. I was like, I can't use this software very well, not to the back of my hand, so comfortable, spend hours and hours and hours, because that was the software we used at my previous firm. And I just spent all day in there, and I could plan and I could do anything. I was so well versed in it. And I thought, why am I starting over? Yeah. Just get that software and move on, so little things like that just a little small decisions, make a decision, move on. I wish I would have done that more. And now I'm gearing myself that way much more, just saying, decide something and then move on with it.
Great tip. My last and final question is a self-ranking question. A to F. How well are you running your firm right now? Stefanie.
Oh, yeah. Ask me first. Gosh darn it.
I'm like, yes.
Did I ask you first last time?
No, I'm just laughing. I'm just laughing because I'm like going, gosh, I don't know. It's a little bit like the imposter thing where I have to give myself a GPA, I guess, then, because I'd probably, I don't know, I guess I give myself a B+, to be fair.
Beautiful.
There's certainly some things that I could do to bring it up to an A. But right now it's going better than I would have ever thought, which is probably why I'm here. And so I'll give myself a solid B+.
Good for you. Chao, how about you?
Yeah, that is a tough question. Probably similar. I think I might give myself an A in terms of where my client count is and thing is. Yeah. But I think because I've had success tapping into my personal network initially, I've maybe done less things on the marketing side, on the blogging side than I wanted to. So maybe that means things are a little slower, maybe 6 months from now. That maybe that's the negative thinking again. So who knows? Yeah. So I think blended, maybe like a B+, and those are different parts of the business I want to focus on.
Yeah. Beautiful. This has been so insightful, folks. Thank you so much for this very, very candid conversation around what it's like in your first 6 months. I'm so happy to release 2 of these episodes for our listeners to really hear it from your mouths about what it's like right now and the ups and downs just in the hours that you spend while you work. I've learned a lot, and I know our listeners have too. So kudos to both you, Stefanie and Chao, on building your dream firm and getting through your first 6 months. I hope in the next year or 2, we can have a look back conversation on the podcast and see how year 2 and 3 are going for each of you. But for now, congratulations. Keep up the good work. Thanks for being part of this industry and part of XYPN. Cheers to you.
Cheers. Thank you, Maddie.
A firm isn't a firm without clients. As the Chief Marketing Officer of your RIA, the most important job you have is guiding prospects through your marketing funnel and converting them to clients. If your funnel has a leak, you could be spinning your wheels and missing opportunities. Mapping your funnel is the first step towards developing an effective marketing strategy and a valuable tool for evaluating the health of an existing one. Download our free template and map your funnel at xyplanningnetwork.com/funnel. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN Radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes, and finally, to find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thank you so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You are not alone, and you are not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm, and that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.